Yeah, so I had maybe like 4 or 5 interviews with my mom, and they were all done over the phone. She lives in the Bay Area, and I live in LA now, and so that was sort of the easiest way to go about it. And I mean, I think our most sort of like personal conversations happen either in the car or on the phone, so never really in person. I mean, that's sort of changing now, but I think prior to this project, that was like very much the case. So I kind of already knew what the story was that she's sort of saying in the film, and what sort of their relationship, her and my dad, and so it's sort of a lot of like guiding questions to try to get her to say like what I want her to say, but and so it's just sort of funny to like have that experience where I think she just kind of wants to talk about what she wants to talk about a lot of the time, and so there's a lot of roundabout things happening. But I mean, she was also really candid in a really way in a way that I was really not expecting. She never a level of honesty that she's never sort of had before. So yeah, it was quite interesting to sort of like go about that, and I think we're quite a lot closer now, I think, after the project.
Wow, that's an amazing outcome.
Yeah.
At what point in the filmmaking process did you come up with the style for this and using the tiles, the schematics?
Yeah, it was a pretty demented process that I liked really. Yeah, it was. So I had the idea for what I wanted to talk about. Like the concept was there, and I wasn't really sure what was happening. Like the project I did earlier in grad school was working with fabric, but in sort of a different way. Animating fabric that had been like commercially printed and seeing what could sort of happen with sort of like found animation in fabric. And after that project, I knew I still wanted to keep working with fabric and wanting to. I had this big idea of wanting to make like this quilt project, and I just sort of assumed that would make a lot of sense with this film. But then, kind of like before I could even start thinking about making that quilt, I got this like really weird like residency in LA that only ever happened once, but it was at this like tile company, and so that's kind of why so much of the film is informed by this like tile project that I wasn't really. I feel like a lot of the project was like a series of like really lucky things that sort of happened and made sense to what I wanted to do. Yeah, I can elaborate on any one part of that, but
well,
yeah.
I know you have some stuff to show us here today, so we'd love to see that. And then can you talk about all the materials that you ended up using in the film? Because it's so beautiful and so effective.
It's the tiles!
It's the tiles, they're famous. I know.
For real.
Yeah, that's animation, people. They were animated.
Yeah, I brought a few of the original ones that
Yeah.
were used in the project.
Yeah.
And so it's not super obvious, but when it's so there's sort of like these sculptures that are you can sort of display them,
Yeah.
and so it's this part, but they're all mounted by with Velcro.
Okay.
But yeah,
And you
so,
did an overhead kind of shot on them?
Yeah, so it's sort of you can kind of view it in different or install it in like different ways. But so I guess one element to the project is so all the designs like on the tile were designed in Illustrator and then printed out on transparencies, and then that was silk screened onto these tiles. So this tile company like fabricated the whole thing, but I just spent like a whole summer like designing it, not really intending for it to be this project, but so I guess in some ways like it kind of just like one thing happened after another, and it all just like snowballed into this thing.
That's
and so
crazy.
the tile project itself, like when it's sort of constructed and as the whole thing, it's meant to be kind of like a portrait of my dad. It sort of, the film kind of shows different, these like schematics of like living situations, and they're all places that my dad has lived, or after marrying my mom. And then the actual like fabric quilt, that's meant to sort of be like a portrait of my mom. It's kind of like annoyingly like Freudian, but yeah, anyways, yeah. So that's kind of how it all fits together.
I feel like it always turns out that way. In the end, you're like, damn it.
I know,
That's
you guys,
what it was.
parent, daddy issues, yeah, it's all the works. Yeah.
Was the quilt also like a physical material? Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a similar process of like image making where I designed everything on the computer in Illustrator, and then sort of the same process of like transparencies, but then using a cyanotype process to kind of have an image onto like fabric textile, and then sewing it all together to make this like really ridiculous quilt.
Wait, did you actually expose it, or is that just the style?
Yeah, so I like had this exposure unit that I like using UV light to sort of like do it. I
Onto
tried,
quilt?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry,
Yeah, it's really
keep
fucked
going.
up.
Yeah, that's insane. And I mean, it looks amazing, and it looks like nothing I've ever seen. Can you talk about inspirations for the styles of what you made?
Like, you mean just like visually what the image looks like?
Yeah,
or?
like were you drawing from anything? Because again, it's just, I haven't seen anything like it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like one way to answer that is like I sort of I studied animation in undergrad and grad school, and but that being said, I like really don't like drawing. Like I know that sounds kind of crazy, but especially drawing people. So a lot of the style kind of came from that, or that's like one just sort of like a rule that I made for like I just don't want to do something that I really would kind of dread doing, and so a lot of the project was thinking about how to depict absence and like what does that sort of look like, and how can I think about depicting that in like a metaphorical way that is interesting and won't make me hate like the project. And so that's sort of how it landed on like, the visual style of like, oh, like I think architecture is really interesting, and I think bedrooms are really interesting, or like living spaces. And so a lot of what we're seeing in the film are these like aerial views of like kind of sort of abstracted like architectural like floor plans. They're not really accurate at all because none of these rooms are like square, obviously. Right. But a lot of that's kind of how that kind of came about, and yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I have a few more questions, but I wanted to open it up if anyone in the audience has any questions. Yes.
I guess why did you choose animation as your field of study in your undergrad? Or how did you get to that point?
Yeah, amazing question. I don't have a great answer. Well, I wanted to work for Disney, and I realized I really hated what they do, kind of. So that's how
a classic experimental animator pipeline.
Yeah, I like went into undergrad wanting to work at like a studio and being like, wow, they can like make people cry. That's so cool. And then after like my first year, it was like, wow, this kind of sucked. Well, there's just like so much more interesting animation out there that I think is possible that in terms of like personal storytelling that isn't so, I don't know, what we normally see. Yeah. So that's how, yeah.
I feel like that's a great answer. Any other? I just wanted to ask, because I know how much of a labor that animation is. How long did this take you? It's okay if you don't have an answer for that, because that's a hard one. But also, what was the hardest part, and what was maybe the most rewarding part in this process?
So I guess this is going to sound like a lot longer than it actually was, but I started the project in 2018. Like the idea, I had like a rough cut of it that didn't have any animation. It was just like an audio edit of the project for like a class. And I finished it in 2023. So it was sort of on and off for like, I don't know, like 5 years.
That seems like a normal timeline for work like this. Right?
Like obviously COVID derailed a lot, but it was just like kind of a lot to figure out, just like on a technical level. I was also like really kind of maybe for good and bad, like unwilling to kind of compromise like the vision I had for this, and was really okay with kind of dragging it out to make sure it was kind of what I wanted it to be. Yeah.
I think you did that for sure. Was there a hardest part and like a most
yes.
rewarding part?
So it's kind of hard. I have like, if people are more curious to see like behind the scenes stuff about the project, it's on my website. But there's on there there's sort of like time lapses of me and a group of people actually animating the tiles moving. That was like by far the hardest part, and yeah, I've never sort of been so challenged with animation and being like having to be very physical with it. The whole piece itself spans roughly the size of like a queen size quilt, and so like I tried animating it by myself for like the first week and realized like, oh, this is like really this is hubris talking, and like it would take actually like 5 years if I were to just do it myself. So there's a lot of like credits at the end of it of just like people that help. It's quite a long list, and so there's a lot of people who help just like move tile, and so that they were people that I feel like really indebted to, and that was like by far the hardest part. I think just like trimming down like interviews is also really difficult, and like finding the film in that way. There's a lot of like interesting stuff that my mom talks about, and my brother is also the other voice in the film, and just trying to figure out how it all fits together. Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience? Okay. Oh, yeah.
In the advent of AI, first of all, like in the advent of AI, it's just so great to see analog processes still incorporated in art today. I do have to ask though, has that been something that you've been considering, like working on in this project or any other projects?
Like with AI?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, and not to be on a soapbox, but I think if you like art at all and you like the world that we currently live in, you shouldn't use AI. Sorry.
Well, on that note,
Sorry.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.